Hello everyone, my name is Decker Link, the trained unprofessional, and welcome to kind of off the cuff, not really intended this to be anything. I didn't even plan on doing this before I kind of came in here and thought to do it. So a couple of days ago, I was going about my business on Facebook, doing what have you. With the world being in the situations it's in right now, it makes sense that more people are spending time on Facebook, probably more so than any other time. I was scrolling through Facebook, and I happened to see a friend of mine, Courtney. She shared a post on Facebook where she was just one of those small Facebook things where you share information that probably is being used by some bot somewhere to hack your security questions. Where it was show your car history, and you have to find a picture and post them in chronological order. You have to have the right color, make, model, year, etc. for all the cars that you've had throughout your life. I do have two honorable mentions that I'll bring up when they're relevant, but today I'm just going to talk about my history in cars. I'm not really a car guy. I couldn't make my way out of a muffler if I had to, but it just seemed like kind of a fun thing to do, you know? So my first honorable mention actually starts off the list. This is a Pontiac Sunbird, and it sucks. At one point in my childhood, this was my mom's car. Now, for reference, none of the pictures you're going to be seeing me use today are ones that I've personally taken, so none of these are the actual physical cars that were involved in my life. I don't know what year this one was, because it was only ever going to be mine, hypothetically, and the one time we tried to make it real, well, let me tell you. When I moved up, my dad was still in Admire, and this car was still in Admire. It was sitting in the garage, no one was using it, it was still kind of like, is it working? There was a huge fucking rust hole above the back tire there, and this thing is fucking small. It is a Sunbird. If that doesn't give you the idea that it's a fucking small car, well, I'm telling you, it's a small fucking car. But finally, I decided I really wanted to have this car, and I had been pitching to get this car, not necessarily because of the car, but because I wanted to have my own fucking car. And this was the only one that no one else was fucking using. So I was like, no one's using it. I want a car. We weren't convinced that it would work. Well, you could get it to go. Getting it to stop, however, that was it's kind of important, and it's not gonna happen. We decided to get into this car, one that we couldn't stop properly, and drive it 30 minutes to the closest town that had even a gas station, which was Osage City. And most of it was highway, so we really didn't have to worry too much. Out in the middle of fucking nowhere, you're not really dealing with bumper traffic, so as long as no one else was around, we'd be fine. Problem is, when we got off the highway, there were people, and this particular weekend, I believe, was the weekend of Thanksgiving. And so when we pulled up to the Casey's that we went to try to get some brake fluid, what wound up stopping us was the cement curb, this little sidewalk in front of the gas station. That stopped us from going right through the fucking wall. We tried to leave, and we were driving out of the parking lot, and we still couldn't stop. We had pumped it to try to get the brake fluid through. We were hoping, we'll see. And we couldn't stop, and there was someone coming, so we wound up driving in a ditch in front of a fire station before eventually getting back on, driving it to my grandma's house, which was right around the corner. Basically, we dumped it in her yard and was like, can we do a pick and pull from this place and have someone drive us home? And that's how I did not wind up having the Pontiac Sunbird be my first car. My car history starts proper with the 1990 Buick Century. This piece of shit right there. That sucked. I only drove this thing for what felt like maybe a month, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe not even a week. Now I'm thinking about it. It was fucking cold out. The thing did not heat up. The main memory I have of this thing, I don't even remember where we got this thing from. I think it was a Craigslist thing. The thing I remember most about it would be driving I was living with my dad in Kansas City at this point. So there was a bit of a fucking gap here. But I was driving from our apartment to my high school, and there's these like winding hilly paths, which is weird to have in Kansas, but bear with me, I know, a little fucking hard to believe. And it would fog up so bad that the defog, nothing would make it defog. And every time I'd wipe it, it would fucking fog up again immediately. So I would have to drive early in the morning to school with the windows down, my head sticking out, and driving, holding the wheel, just like, oh God, I hope my depth perception is good. Spoilers, my depth perception is not good. I did run into a couple of curbs, nothing serious, but there were a couple of times where I'd be driving, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to hit the line, and then I hear, oh shit, sorry, no, don't want to hit that. What did this car in was totally anticlimactic. I drove it to school one day, totally normal, turned it off, went into class, came back out, thing would not turn on. Not even clicks, the lights wouldn't respond, nothing fucking responded on this thing. It just totally bricked. And I remember we even got the school auto guy, the school auto shop teacher, to fucking look at this thing. And even he was like, yeah, your car's fucked. So my first car went out in a meh. It was fucking boring. That brings us to the car that took me into college. It was 1993, right? The 1993 Dodge Caravan. In the best creeper green. We got this off of Craigslist again from some really shady neighborhood. We fucking checked the hell out of this thing because it did not smell legal, let's put it that way. The Buick Century died of what I call block breaking. The engine block was just gone. Nothing responded. It would not fucking work. This was a blocked block because I never checked any of the fluids. And every once in a while I would check it. Every couple of months I would check a fluid and I'd be like, oh, that's kind of low, let me fucking dump a whole jug into there. Oh Jesus. And I had some fun in this car though. I really took advantage of that no back seat thing. Got a lot of miles in this car, and I also drove it a lot too. Ow! Why would people slap themselves if the things are funny? That hurts. So how'd this fucking car die? So this was a blocked block because I didn't fucking watch any of the fluids. And so there was just one day where I was driving it to fucking school. I was living in Kansas, driving across the border to go to school in Missouri. And I used to love to park at the very top level of a parking garage. I remember driving it, trying to get it up those fucking things. It would be like trying to get it up the spiral fucking garage, and I finally got it to a parking spot, and I was like, this fucking thing is dead. This is not good. So we got a warning because it was sitting there for a little bit. We got a warning that it was going to get towed or that I was going to get a fine or something if we didn't move it. And we were like, we can't fucking move it, and it would cost a lot to get it towed, and I really didn't know about pick and pull at the time, and we needed basically to get money from this thing so I could buy another one because everyone here was living paycheck to paycheck. There was no savings. There was no, fucking spare money lying around to fucking buy this thing. And so my dad went out with the intent to get this thing home. He had a strategy that is really bad for your engine. Essentially what would happen is because this thing was trying to die, we had to drive it home in like North Kansas City, fucking heavy traffic, because that was the only time he could get up there to do it before the deadline. And so we're driving this thing back in huge fucking traffic. And what he would essentially do is every time it was about to die or give out on him, he would fucking force it into like neutral, I think. And that would keep it alive because the fucking engine wouldn't have to work because it was in neutral. So he would let it go into neutral and then start to drift and fucking back into drive. And so we drove from Missouri to Kansas, right over the border, fucking and just surrounded by fucking cars. But we actually got someone to buy it. When we had it, someone came over to take a look at it. They did a test drive. And miraculously, it didn't have problems that day. I was at school at the time, so my dad told me about this. He went on the test drive with a guy. The van didn't have any noticeable problems for the short little test drive my dad did with this guy. He had a drawn-up contract, a bill of sale, and signed it. The guy drove off. As soon as the guy was out of sight, my dad was like... The guy never came back. Seemingly, what I would imagine is the guy knew there was a problem with it and would fix it up. I don't know where it is today. Don't really want to know, especially knowing what went on in that fucking thing. I'd rather let those memories die. And that's what brings us to this little Hot Wheel. This is a 2000 Saturn S Series Coupe. Finally in the 21st century, and god damn, in the early 2000s, people were really pushing this you're skinny or you're fucked mentality. This is technically, this is as close as I could find. It's not the exact, because mine had like a sunroof, but like whatever, who gives a shit. I also had a big ass fucking gash in the paint on the driver's side door. Did I really fucking look for that? No. But as you can see, this is a smaller car than the van, and that didn't stop me getting some miles. And that's what I even know what I'm saying. But the point is that like this, for a bigger guy, it was not the best choice. This was the car that saw me exit college and go full-time into the workforce. You might notice this little line here, now that I got my cursor. This little line here is why I say that this car had 2.5 doors. Because there's a driver's side, passenger side, and then that little line there opens out. Once you open the driver's side door this way, it opens out this way. But it's a little door. And you could squeeze some poor bastards into the back of that thing. But primarily, because I'm a tall guy, I'd have the seat pushed all the way back. And so there was like no room back there. And I remember somehow cramming 4 people into this fucking thing. Needless to say, I didn't get asked to chauffeur people very often. This car to me, it reminds me of times where I was spending a lot of time with other people, and in a platonic way for a change. And it was something. The car was never great, but that was an interesting time in my life. What was really interesting is how this car left my life. I was driving to D&D one day. I thought it would be funny to dress in all burgundy because I'm an idiot who doesn't know what things that are funny are. It was riding a little rough, but I had oil problems and coolant problems with this guy. I also had to replace the whole exhaust line on this thing because of an unfortunate incident I had on a interstate one day. Fortunately, I had a friend whose dad was willing to replace the exhaust line for me as long as I bought the parts and a 6-pack for him. So that was cool. But ever since then, I'd really had a problem with this thing just guzzling coolant and oil. But I'd kind of gotten used to it. Even though everyone around me was like, I've never had a car fucking drink this much fluid. Like, this is not good. And one day I had decided I was going to try to get an oil change like before D&D, but when I got to the place I wanted to get my oil change at, it was full. So I was like, I'll do it tomorrow. And so I got on the interstate and I started driving to D&D. I was living the next town over from Caleb at the time. I'm driving along and it's really rough. I'm like, what the fuck? And I get really close to this like I-35, 435 two highways that are crisscrossing. I'm almost to it, and I'm in like a far right lane, and the fucking thing starts to and like the lights start like dimming really bad. I'm like, what the fuck? And I hear this back pop, and I smell smoke, and I see smoke, and I'm like, oh shit, oh god. And so I turn on my turn signal, and I'm like cutting people off, trying to get over to the shoulder, because on the right of me is like turn lanes, on ramps for fucking 435. So I had to go to the left to get to the inside shoulder, which fortunately there was a sizable one. And of course this car's fucking small, so it would fit in any shoulder pretty much. But I get over there, and just in time, because this fucking thing was kaput. And it was smoking a little bit. And so I get out of the thing. I get a good distance away from it. Doesn't seem like the fire, there's no like visible fire eking out from under the hood, and the smoke was dying down a little bit. So when I feel like it's safe to go back to the car, I go in and I call my friend. I call Caleb and I explain to him what's going on. I need a ride. And I really had no game plan on how to get this thing out of the interstate. I knew that if cars were left there for long enough to get towed, and I didn't know how I'd fucking go about it. But in that moment, I was so fucking scared. Because, mind you, I'm on the fucking interstate, and there's people going 90 miles an hour right fucking next to me. And I'm wearing all fucking burgundy. I look like a fucking, like, I don't know what. I looked like a big-ass plum. Like, it did not look good. So I'm trying to clear my stuff out of the car that I wanted to take with me, because I didn't want it to get, if it got broken into, what would I feel bad about missing? And out of nowhere, I just hear like, how's it going? Behind me. And it was a cop. A cop had pulled over, gotten out of his car, and walked up to me, and I did not hear it. That's how loud the cars zooming past me were. I also have hearing damage. Also, fun fact, I have a bit of an irrational fear of police officers. Don't know why. In that particular moment, a cop walked up to a huge dude wearing all wine colors, digging shit out of a car that was slightly smoldering. Not a good first impression. I explained to him what's going on. He's actually very helpful. He explains that he can get a tow truck, and that how to get that arranged and how to make it as low cost to me as possible. Basically, if I could find a shop within a certain distance, the tow would be free. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. That's awesome. When they got it into the garage, they tried to start it up, and it fucking blew again. The fucker exploded twice, is what I'm getting at here. So you've got a bricked block, a blocked block, and now you've had a block that exploded twice. Do not say you'll do the oil change tomorrow. That is what I'm getting at here. After the Saturn died, I didn't actually have a car for a while. I mostly would drive Bri's car when she wasn't using it. I don't have a picture for that because I'm not going to talk about it very much. It was a fucking Chrysler Sebring, I think. It was kind of run down. It couldn't lock. I didn't trust that car at all. But we did take our first trip to Chicago in that car. And that was a terrifying experience, not just because of the car, but there you go. So after a while, we got tired of sharing the cars, and we couldn't make it work anymore if she was going to get a different job, and I was trying to, it was not fucking working. So I got in contact with my dad, who had previously offered to work with me on buying a car that he had, and that I remember him getting when I was living with him. Now, I hadn't been for a number of years, but that brings us to this car. The 2004 Pontiac Grand Prix GT. You've probably seen this car drive around at some point. It's a very affordable car. A lot of people have this car, and you don't really realize how many people have this car until you have one yourself. It's a pretty common fucking car. And I had this car for a long time. This was actually a car that, was seen in videos not even a year old. The acquisition of this car is kind of a not a pleasant memory. I won't go into a lot of the details, but things got really, really strained between me and my dad about how we went about the transaction of this car. There are still unpleasantries about this experience that I really it I don't want to say that it permanently damaged the relationship or anything, but it in part led to a re-examination of the kind of relationship I have with my family as a whole, because it made me realize a lot about what a family time means versus what people think it means, and what I want it to mean to me. And it sounds dramatic. I still, I fucking was talking to my dad earlier today. I don't hate the guy. I still love my dad. Obviously we're distant because I live in a whole different fucking state, but maybe one day I'll go into some of the details about this if I ever feel comfortable with it. But the point is that this car never felt good. It felt awkward. There was a lot of things wrong with it, more than I thought when I got it. And it's the first returning brand, by the way. It technically shares brands with the honorable mention asterisk first car, the Pontiac Sunbird. It is the only repeat brand car I've ever had, and I never even really had the Sunbird, so technically I still haven't, depending on how you look at it. Beyond the acquisition of this car, it was nice to have my own car, first of all. This was a better car than the one Prix had, that's for sure. And eventually, there's actually another honorable mention that kind of runs alongside this one. Oh, sweet Christ. That's a lot of tree. Like I said, I'm not a car guy, but I get sentimental about weird shit sometimes. There it is, the 2003 Kia Sedona. So now we've had Pontiac, Saturn, fucking Buick, Kia. It's fucking weird. The reason I mention the Kia as well is that not long after I got the Pontiac, my car world just exploded because Bri's car also went down permanently. It was, I believe, having electrical problems. We got this Kia Sedona from a dude who liked to Frankenstein cars, apparently. We didn't know that. Bri and I are not the most automobile literate people. And there were probably a number of red flags that we overlooked that we would only come to later in time. I remember one time I took it in for an oil change pretty much right after we bought it. And the mechanic came back out and said, "You haven't paid for this thing, have you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "I probably wouldn't have." And I was like, "Okay, you're not, I'm going to another shop." He's right, though. There were wires dangling in this thing. The motor had been replaced haphazardly. There was a huge fucking crack across the windshield. A lot of the motors and some of the smaller things, like the motor for the windows and the sunroof, the trunk, there was a lot of shit that just does not work. For a while, we had to get so much shit on both of these cars replaced. Multiple flat tires. The brakes on both of them were totally shot. It was actually funny is I wound up using the Kia more than the Pontiac, even though so Bri and I actually flipped. We didn't change the titles or anything, but she would wind up using this one more because it was her size, and I would use this one because it was me sized. It was very clear that the long, staggering problems with both of these cars were going to make them need to be replaced pretty soon. I didn't really know which one would die first, but turns out the one that died first was the Pontiac. The Pontiac died first. I guess the better visual representation of that would be if I got rid of that one, because I'm talking about this one. But this was during the big fundraiser that I did, trying to implore people to please help us move out because we were living a very, very unhealthy and bad living situation. I remember I put out a video where it was literally the same day where I was in the car trying to celebrate the fact that we had reached a fucking one of our milestones, and that is the exact same day where this car decided to finally just overheat and totally shit the bed, and it couldn't be fixed. The block was fucked, the fluids weren't working, the brakes were fucked, the engine was fucked, everything was fucked on this thing. And what was a very unpleasant chapter in my life finally came to an end when we had to get rid of this Pontiac. But what of the Kia Sedona, you might be asking? Well, in that same video, I ended it in the Kia Sedona. God damn it, the Kia Sedona. Everything's flipped, so I can't fucking... We ended that video in this fucking thing, and even in that video, I describe the fact that it was doing this shit, where you're bouncing. Don't pay attention to my tit, but it was bouncing, and it was because the tire was fucked, and the handling had been fucked, the alignment was fucked, and it was also having severe brake problems, and the engine was fucked, and a lot of the motors were fucked, and it got to the point where we wound up needing to replace that too. So at the time, we had just gotten Prix a lease on the 2019 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Very nice, like a red color. She likes red. That's probably one of her favorite colors, if not her favorite color. And the Kia was going down. I went to go get it looked at and checked. I had an appointment at this car dealership, this Kia dealership, kind of down the road. The thing they hadn't told me on the phone is that they had a charge just to see you, not even to fix anything. And it was some ridiculous sum of money, and I was like, you know what? With all the things that's wrong with this thing, me and Bri had already talked about it, it was more costly to fucking keep this fucking car and fix all the things that were wrong with it than to just have a monthly payment on another lease. And it really sucked because now we would have two fucking car payments at the same time when we had this fucking thing paid off. But we had to do it. So down went the Kia, we traded it in, and that leads us to my current car. Introducing Blueberry, the 2010 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's the same make and model as the car Bri has, but 9 years older. Also, mine is not near that shiny. The tires are way worse too. Also, mine has a broken muffler and a missing side mirror. And it has like, I think 200,000. No, I think it's either 120,000 miles or 200,000. I think it's 120,000 miles. Point is, this fucker's not new, and it sounds like a tank. Obviously, there's some things to fix in it, but by and large, this is the car I've been most satisfied with. Not only is it the brand I like the most, which is Jeep, for no real good reason. This is me size. You know, I've been driving this car since about, I would say December, probably, and I've been pretty satisfied with it. You know, still got a long way to go before we pay this fucking thing off, man, but, you know, as long as it lasts a good amount of time, it'll be worth it. The only major thing I'd like to get fixed on it, we need to replace all the tires, because at one point the one of the brakes were so bad that the tire locked up, and so it really scraped the shit out of my tires that were locked. So I have to replace those. But the main thing is that fucking muffler, because again, the thing sounds like a fucking tank, but you know, it passed emissions, and you know, it runs pretty fucking good. You know, it's not the smoothest ride in the world, but I imagine once I get that muffler fixed, there's going to be a number of things that, and even the fucking side mirror being gone, it's not the big deal. It's the passenger side one, and I'm pretty aware of my surroundings, even if I have to look over my shoulder or whatever, it's fine. So that's my current car, and yeah, that's about it. I didn't expect to be talking about this thing for an hour, so hopefully I can cut down the time on this thing a little bit, but thank you for listening and watching my riveting history of cars. I don't usually talk about cars. I don't know anything about cars. But there you go. Cars I've had. Yay. So thank you all very much for watching. And until next time, I've been the Trained Unprofessional. You are not. And I will see you